Rising from the Flames by Janson Davies. Chapter 1. Calm Before the Storm. The firehouse hummed with the subtle rhythm of routine, coffee brewing, boots clunking over concrete, radios murmuring half-heard updates from dispatch. Fire Chief Frank Martell leaned against the bay door, arms folded, his eyes scanning the early morning haze that curled off the asphalt. It was the kind of peaceful moment firefighters learned not to trust. Still, the quiet suited Frank. At 34, he wore the years and soot well. His hands were thick and scarred, his shoulders broad with the burden of lives saved and some lost, and his mind honed for split-second decisions that made all the difference. "Engine 21's rig is running hot," came a voice from behind. Danny, the rookie, cheerful and always a little too loud. "Just tweaked the fuel lines and checked the foam tank. She's ready for battle." Frank nodded, offering the ghost of a smile. "Good. Let's hope today doesn't turn into a war zone." He turned and took a long breath, inhaling the scent of motor oil, damp canvas, and a hint of bacon someone was definitely not supposed to be frying inside the dorm kitchen. But before he could say a word, the tone dropped. An ear-splitting alarm tore through the station. Every unit's pager chirped in brutal unison. The overhead speakers came alive with frantic urgency. "Mass casualty alert. Multiple explosions downtown. All units report immediately." Frank's instincts clicked like clockwork. He strode toward Engine 21. Danny and crew were already gearing up, adrenaline painting their faces with streaks of concern and focus. As they roared out of the station, the city skyline unveiled a nightmare. Smoke towered into the sky like black pillars. The ground trembled faintly beneath them as distant sirens merged with something far more primal, growls, echoing metallic growls from something not entirely human. Frank narrowed his eyes. It wasn't just a fire. It was a war. And it had only just begun. Chapter 2. Mass Casualty. The city had never sounded so unnatural. Sirens wailed, but beneath them, beneath the cries and static, was something deeper. A low thrumming that echoed in Frank's chest like a distant war drum. As Engine 21 barreled down Main Street, the urban skyline twisted into something feral. Buildings scorched, windows shattered, and shadows moved against the flames, huge, impossible silhouettes shifting with eerie coordination. Smoke churned like dark ocean waves, and through its folds Frank saw the shapes for the first time. Not debris, not aircraft, creatures. Towering alien figures with exoskeletons that shimmered like darkened glass. Their limbs flickered with phosphorescent runes, and their eyes, glowing blue slits, scanned the streets like cold machines built for judgment. He didn't breathe until the engine halted. Then everything unfolded like a nightmare in fast motion. "Set up on the northeast corner," Frank barked, vaulting out of the truck. "Danny, grab hose 3. Move." Firefighters scrambled across cracked pavement, dragging lines toward the inferno. Civilians ran in every direction. Some collapsed from wounds, some sobbed over injured loved ones. And overhead, a boom shook the sky as one of the alien creatures crushed a building with a single blow. A grocery store front exploded just ahead, glass and flame fanning outward, and through the chaos, Frank heard it. A scream, high, human, trapped. He turned instinctively, zeroing in on a burning shop front. The doorway was half collapsed, a glowing sign flickered above it. Ria's Boutique. Framed in the doorway, half obscured by smoke, stood a young woman, frozen. Her blue gown shimmered in the flame light. A sparkly tiara gleamed faintly above her forehead. Frank didn't hesitate. Boots slammed pavement. He raced into the inferno, heart thundering. "Come on," he shouted, reaching out. She tried to move, but flinched as the ceiling groaned. Debris fell. Frank lunged forward, grabbed her waist, and pulled her clear seconds before the shop collapsed behind them. They rolled onto the pavement. His arms shielded her from embers. The princess coughed violently, eyes wide with panic, and something else. Recognition. Frank sat up, panting. Are you hurt? She looked at him as though through him. You shouldn't have saved me. That stopped him cold. What? She sat up slowly, blue gown singed, tiara askew. They're not here for your city. They're here for me. He stared. Flames roared behind them. Alien ships circled in the distance. The world was falling apart. And this strange, elegant girl, this princess, had just changed everything. Chapter 3. The Blue Gown in the Flames. Frank's pulse thundered louder than the fires behind him. The girl, no, the princess, stood barefoot on broken glass, smoke curling around her like a veil. He squinted through the chaos, trying to ground the moment in reality. You're telling me those things, those monsters, are here for you? He asked slowly. She nodded, her voice low but steady. My name is Adira, Princess Adira Talanai of the House of Torlari. My father, King Oloran, lies on his deathbed on the planet Relarian. I'm the heir to a throne I never wanted. Frank stared, the firefight fading into a surreal blur. I came to Earth to escape, Adira continued, to live freely, anonymously. I love your music, your food, your chaos, even your coffee. It tastes like burnt potatoes but makes my heart race. She paused. But my absence triggered a search. My father's council feared rebellion, so they sent the sentinels. Frank's mind tripped over every word. Relarian, throne, rebellion. But he steadied himself like he always did, one crisis at a time. So, you're telling me, he said, if they find you, they'll take you home and stop burning my city. They'll call off the assault, but they'll never stop hunting me. I'll never be free again. Adira's voice cracked. Not melodrama, heartache, loneliness braided through every syllable. Frank looked over his shoulder. His team was doing what they could, but the fires were spreading. 2 more explosions erupted from the harbor. They were losing ground, losing lives. I know a place, he said finally, his voice rough. We'll get you out of here. Adira blinked. Why would you help me? Frank stood, extending a hand. Because nobody should be forced to burn for who they are. She took it. Moments later, they were inside the engine's cab, smoke darkening the windows. Frank radioed in a false mechanical failure, put his second-in-command in charge, and peeled out into the mountains. They left chaos behind. Beneath the city's roar, a decision had been made, duty bent under the weight of something deeper. Hope. Chapter 4. Truth Among Ashes. Frank's mountain cabin sat cradled in the woods like a secret whispered by the pines. The drive had been long, silent, tense, Adira staring out the window while Frank kept his eyes on the road, pretending this wasn't the strangest day of his life. The gravel crunched as they pulled in. Smoke was distant now, just a smear on the horizon. He helped her out of the cab. Her gown was tattered, dusted with ash, and her tiara had disappeared somewhere between the getaway and the engine's interior. Inside, the cabin was modest. Stone hearth, weathered couch, a crooked bookshelf lined with fire manuals, mystery novels, and a half-finished model spaceship. Adira stepped inside slowly. You live here? When I need to get away, Frank said, setting his radio on the counter. The city's loud. Sometimes you need space to hear your own thoughts. She looked around with a strange softness in her eyes. It's peaceful, like Earth itself bonds with you out here. Frank leaned against the frame. So, Princess of Relarian, huh? She sighed, sitting on the couch. I haven't said that name aloud in months. My world is made of silver cities and crystal air, a planet made of ice and isolation. But none of it feels real compared to this place. Her fingers traced the edges of a coffee mug. Your people live like they mean it. Frank crouched down beside her. Why not go back and rule? If it stops the killing... Because it's a prison. Velvet-lined, yes, but still a cage. My birth was a coronation. My every thought has been observed, judged, curated. I came to Earth to learn who I am without a crown. Frank studied her face. Beneath the royal bearing, he saw someone searching, not for safety, for self. I've spent over 10 years crawling through fire, he said quietly, saving people, watching cities burn. Never had time to ask who I am. Their eyes met. The silence was warmer now. Adira smiled faintly. I guess we're both running from something. Outside, wind rustled through the trees. Somewhere distant, the sky shimmered, the barest flicker of blue as an alien scout ship passed overhead. They didn't speak of it. Not yet. In that fragile cabin between wood smoke and stars, two fugitives began the slow work of becoming real. Chapter 5. The Fugitive Royal. The cabin creaked with the wind. Frank stood by the window, watching the shadows between pine branches, quiet but heavy. The sky was darkening unnaturally fast. Even at this altitude, something about the horizon felt watched. Adira sat at the corner table, wrapped in an old firehouse jacket. Her fingers traced the seams absent-mindedly as Frank heated a tin of chili on the stove. Your people, he said slowly, these sentinels, what exactly do they want from you? She stared at the wood grain like it held the answer. They want certainty. My father's illness has fractured Relarian's political alliances. The council fears civil war without a legitimate heir. But not just a queen. They want obedience, submission, a pawn to stabilize the realm. Frank handed her a spoon and sat across from her. You don't seem like a pawn. I wasn't always this brave, she said, voice soft. Earth changed me. Your kind changed me. I watched firefighters dive into hell just to save strangers. I watched you risk everything to pull me out of those flames. Frank exhaled. You talk like I did something noble, but the truth is, I saw someone screaming and I moved. That's all it was. Adira gave him a look, half smile, half sadness. That's all it needs to be. Outside, a light flickered across the treetops. Frank moved to the porch and saw it, a beam of glowing blue, scanning like a sonar. He stepped back inside. They're closer than we thought, he said. I know these woods better than most. There's a ranger tunnel about a mile down the slope. Could keep us underground till dark. No, she said. I won't run forever. Frank frowned. You sound like you've already decided something. Adira stood. Her posture was straight, regal again. I won't let them destroy Earth looking for me. If I leave now, on my terms, I can negotiate a ceasefire. He stepped toward her. That's not your job. You don't owe them anything. I owe Earth my truth. Her eyes met his, clear and burning. And in that instant, Frank realized he wasn't protecting her anymore. She was choosing to protect him. Chapter 6. Into the Woods. Twilight spread across the forest like bruises on the sky. Frank moved with practiced stealth, leading Adira through thick underbrush, their steps cushioned by damp earth and fallen needles. The old ranger tunnel was less than a mile away, a forgotten maintenance passage carved through the hillside decades ago, hidden now by time and disuse. Adira kept pace surprisingly well. She had shed the remnants of her gown for jeans and a flannel shirt, borrowed from Frank's closet, the sleeves comically long. Her hair was braided back, her posture firm, royalty molded by exile. I still don't understand this world, she said as they reached a ridge. The wilderness. It feels like everything's unfinished, but alive. Frank knelt beside a tree, catching his breath. It is unfinished. That's the beauty of it. Earth's always growing, always breaking and healing, just like people. Adira paused, her eyes distant. Relarian is controlled. Symmetry, calculation, quiet. You can live an entire life without ever being surprised. Sounds awful, Frank muttered, brushing aside moss to reveal the steel hatch he was looking for. They pried it open together. Inside, the tunnel yawned, dark, musty, metallic. As they stepped in, the temperature dropped, and their flashlights flickered across forgotten pipes and mold-splotched walls. Hours passed in that silence. They sat against the wall near a rusted breaker box, legs stretched out, flashlights dimmed. "You ever wonder," Adira murmured, "what your life might have been if you were someone else? Born somewhere else?" Frank chuckled softly. "All the time, but I think I'd still be trying to keep someone safe. It's just who I am." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "I wish I'd met you first, before the palace, before the crown. Maybe then I'd know who I really am." Frank turned to look at her. Their shoulders touched. "You're figuring it out, Adira, and you're not alone." A quiet beat passed between them. Then, far down the corridor, a faint vibration rippled through the floor. Frank tensed. "They've found the tunnel." Adira stood. "They won't stop until I return." Frank grabbed his gear, eyes hard. "Then we don't wait for them. We move." They climbed through the back end of the passage into the deeper forest, just as electric blue search beams split through the trees like celestial blades. And beneath the roar of alien tech and rustling branches, the tension between two fugitives began to shift from fear into something far more dangerous. Trust. Chapter 7. Ghosts and Stars. The stars stitched themselves across the black canvas above, sparkling like distant memories too far to touch. Frank and Adira sat at the edge of a cliff ridge overlooking the valley. Moonlight streaking through the pines, wind cool and crisp after hours underground. They'd walked without speaking for miles, but silence had weight now. Not of fear, of everything unsaid. Frank pulled a blanket from his pack and tossed it around Adira's shoulders. "It'll dip below freezing soon." She smiled faintly. "You prepare for everything." "Old habit. Fire doesn't care what season it is." "But you forgot one thing," she teased. "What's that?" he asked. "I was raised on a planet of sub-zero temperatures. This is like a summer day in comparison." He just looked at her more closely, truly realizing in that moment she was an alien. In return, she studied him for a moment. "You said earlier that you've spent years saving people, crawling through fire. But who saves you?" Frank let out a quiet breath. "No one ever asks that." "I'm asking now." He leaned back, gaze fixed on the stars. "I lost someone. Years ago. My wife, Claire. Car accident. The night I got promoted to chief. I was too busy shaking hands to answer the call." Adira reached out, her fingers grazing his. "And you never forgave yourself." "Not once." She drew closer. "You burn so brightly, Frank. Not just in fire, but in heart. I wish I had that." "You do," he said, voice thick. "You ran from destiny to find your own truth. That's brave." The wind rustled through the trees. In the silence that followed, something shifted, not sudden or dramatic, but quiet and sure. They turned toward each other, and they kissed, softly, like breath caught in a moment too fragile to last. The stars above held their silence as two fugitives touched, each carrying ghosts, each holding flames neither could extinguish. Far below in the valley, a blue beams flickered once more. The scouts were closing in. But for now, in the hush between heartbeats and galaxies, Frank and Adira chose each other. Chapter 8. The search intensifies. The forest groaned under pressure. Distant branches cracked, not by wind or wildlife, but by something deliberate, calculating. Frank crouched behind a granite outcrop, binoculars trained on the valley. 6 scout ships hovered low, their shimmering forms camouflaged against the night. Drones zipped like hornets through trees, scanning and seeding blue light into shadowed crevices. "They're tightening the grid," he said quietly. "Looks like a full sweep coming from the south ridge." Adira stood beside him, lips pressed into a line. The earlier warmth between them was still there, but hidden now beneath adrenaline and dread. "They'll use psychic triangulation next," she said. "Relarian tech isn't just visual. They attune to emotional signatures. That's how they found me in San Mora. I stayed too long at the art gallery." Frank blinked. "Because you liked the paintings?" Adira nodded. "It reminded me of the stars from my childhood. I got too comfortable. Left a trace." Frank swallowed hard. "Then we've got a problem." They retreated back into the cabin, tension sizzling in the silence between them. Frank moved with methodical precision, loading a flare gun, prepping thermal blankets, disabling every visible power source. Adira watched him from the table, her fingers interlaced. "There's something I haven't told you." Frank stopped. "Now's the time. If they catch us together, they won't just take me. They'll erase your memory of all this. Relarian protocol. Contamination cleanse." He stared at her. "Erase me." She nodded. "Everything. Me. The attack. Your choice to help." Frank stepped closer. "They can take you back. They can torch the sky. But they don't get to decide who I am." Adira rose, her voice trembling. "Then we have to leave now. I know where they'll land the tether ship. We can beat them to the extraction point and maybe negotiate." Outside, the forest pulsed blue once more. Frank took her hand. "Let's make this count." And as they vanished into the trees, the search narrowed with lethal precision. Somewhere above, a command ship blinked to life, its AI initiating final descent. But down in the valley, beneath heat and memory and stars, a fire refused to be extinguished. Chapter 9. What It Means to Be Human. The trail led to a clearing carved into the mountain's shoulder, scorched earth surrounded by monolithic pine trees, all bowing as if intimidated by the vessel descending from above. It wasn't a ship in the conventional sense. It shimmered like folded glass, iridescent and massive. Suspended between dimensions, its edges quivered in and out of visibility. Blue tethers snapped through the air like lightning trapped in slow motion. Adira watched with a stillness Frank had never seen before. "They'll land in 30 minutes, she said. "There will be a negotiator. Or, if they see resistance, they'll take me by force." Frank adjusted his radio, checking signal strength. "You still sure this is the only way?" "I don't want Earth to burn because I love it too much." Her voice was quiet. "But I also don't want to go back as a puppet." She turned to him then, eyes shining with every choice that had led to this place. "You taught me what it means to choose, to feel danger and still run toward it. You live like your soul is made of bravery." Frank swallowed hard. "You think bravery makes you human?" "No." Her smile was gentle. "It's choosing despite fear. It's building meaning from brokenness. It's you." He blinked, unsure whether to speak or reach for her. But before the moment could shift, light exploded across the clearing. The ship fully materialized. A panel opened, and from its glow stepped a figure cloaked in silver, a member of the High Council. Adira stiffened. The figure spoke without moving its lips. "Princess Talanai, we are prepared to restore you to your station." Frank stepped forward. "And Earth?" The voice responded with clinical detachment. Our directive ends once the heir resumes her role. Peace will follow. Adira stepped past Frank. Her hand grazed his, fleeting, final. This isn't goodbye, she whispered. He watched her ascend the ramp, swallowed by light. Then something inside him cracked. No fire had ever taught him this feeling, no rescue drill, no command protocol. He ran, toward the ship, toward her. The guards moved, but Adira shouted, "He's with me!" And in the next instant, Frank felt the tug of gravity unravel. The world fell silent, trees bent, stars stretched, and then he was gone. Together they were taken. Not as queen and subject, not as savior and rescued, but as two souls who had chosen each other. Chapter 10. They've found us. Relarian wasn't what Frank expected. He had imagined crystalline spires and eerie alien silence. Instead, he found himself standing on a terrace overlooking a city carved from ice, silver towers rising like music, and air that shimmered with static cold. But beauty couldn't disguise tension. Adira stood beside him, her posture steel straight, her eyes scanning everything. At her arrival, the city had gone into a frenzy. Fireworks sparked overhead. Courtiers bowed with rehearsed grace. But behind every gesture, judgment simmered. They were escorted into the palace beneath armed archways and ancient statues, each one a reminder of lineage, sacrifice, and control. Frank felt the pressure of centuries watching him. In the throne hall, the High Council assembled. 12 robed figures stood like shadows, their faces half obscured by veils of light. Their voices arrived in waves, empathic projections of expectation. "Princess Talanai," said the lead counselor, a man whose eyes glowed like twin eclipses. "You have chosen return. We are prepared to coronate you tomorrow. Civil order depends on it." Adira stepped forward. "Only if the attacks cease. Earth must be left untouched, and I will reign by choice, not command." Murmurs rose. Frank felt the weight of their scrutiny shift toward him. "This man is contaminated with forbidden knowledge," said another. "Protocol demands his memory be cleansed." Adira's breath hitched. Number, "If I am to reign, my rule begins with mercy. Emotion clouds governance." "No," Frank said, his voice firm. "Emotion defines it." Silence. Then a flicker. One of the elder counselors leaned forward. "You are the fighter of fires. What is fire, Earthman?" Frank met his eyes. "It's chaos, pain, decision, but it's also the only thing that tells you who you are when everything's falling apart." Another beat of silence. The elders conferred. Then, almost imperceptibly, the glow around them dimmed. "The sentinels will be recalled," said the lead voice. "Earth shall remain untouched. The princess will reign by her own accord, provided she survives the trial." Adira turned sharply. "No one spoke of a trial. You must prove sovereignty, not through bloodline, but through courage." Frank stepped toward her. "You don't face it alone." But the council's voice boomed. "Only Relarian blood may walk the crucible." Adira met his gaze. "Then I'll face it with what Earth taught me." She took his hand, just for a breath. And then she turned, toward a trial no one could face for her. Not even love. Chapter 11. Sacrifice and Stardust. The crucible was not a place. It was a test woven from light and memory, Relarian's ancient tradition for coronation without conquest, a space suspended beyond time, accessed only by the bloodline of the Torlari. Frank watched from a viewing chamber, cold obsidian walls surrounding a pane of ethereal glass through which Adira stepped into the trial. The floor beneath her shimmered with liquid metal. Above, stars burned like watching ancestors. A voice, neither male nor female, rose in her mind. "State your intention." Adira stood tall. "I seek rule by choice, not lineage. I seek peace without silence. To rule, one must survive one's truths." Suddenly the chamber shifted. She was back on Relarian at 10 years old, surrounded by counselors pressuring her to memorize political treaties before her voice had changed. Then it melted into a memory of Earth, being chased through a neon-lit alley, fire blooming behind her, freedom so close she could taste it. Then came the final vision. Frank, broken, dying, flames rising around them. And in this spectral moment, Adira was offered a choice: to reign without love, safe and sovereign, or to forsake the crown and vanish into anonymity, love intact, but lineage dissolved. She staggered. Then she knelt and whispered, "I choose both." The chamber shattered into light. Outside, the council panicked. No heir had ever split the trial. But moments later, the crucible reformed, and a throne emerged from its core. Unlike any before it, it shimmered with both Relarian crystal and earth-forged steel. Adira stepped from the trial, changed, crowned not by lineage, but by integration. The lead counselor bowed. "You have rewritten what it means to lead." Frank rushed to her side. "You all right?" She smiled, tears streaking down her cheeks. "I'm more than all right. I'm real." The city erupted in light, no longer in rebellion, no longer in mourning. A queen had risen, not inherited but forged, and beside her stood the man who taught her how to burn brightly. Chapter 12. Journey Beyond the Flames. Weeks passed like whispers. Relarian adjusted to its new rhythm, ruled not by ancient mandate, but by a queen forged in defiance and love. Adira's reign wasn't quiet, it reverberated with change. She met with rebel factions, reformed council traditions, and opened interstellar correspondence with Earth's diplomats. Peace wasn't assumed, it was built. And Frank Martell, he stayed. Not as consort, not as figurehead, but as Earth's ambassador and the Queen's most trusted confidant. Where she brought heart to strategy, he brought grit to diplomacy. His humble firehouse instincts became a blueprint for reform. Train, serve, protect without dominance. Relarian cities began installing communal fire systems. Young guards recited Earth fire codes alongside royal law. In quiet moments, they escaped the palace, back to the Starscape cliffs where they'd first felt free. "I used to think purpose had to be earned through suffering," Adira whispered one night. "But maybe it can be chosen with joy." Frank grinned. "That's the first non-flammable philosophy you've shared." She laughed. It resonated across the galaxy. One evening, as Relarian's twin moons lit the sky, a signal came from Earth. A thank you transmission. San Mora had rebuilt. Children played in parks again. The Sentinels had left no scars, only memory. The city even named a new rescue center in Frank's honor. Adira touched the message crystal and turned to him. "You saved your world, and mine." Frank nodded slowly. "But you gave me something I never found in fire." "What's that?" "A reason to stay once the flames went out." They stood beneath the stars, neither royalty nor guardian, but simply two people who dared to choose love when the universe demanded surrender. And as dawn broke across Relarian's silver horizon, it carried not the shadow of a crown, but the warmth of a fire that had finally learned how to burn gently. Epilogue. Between flame and sky. The sun over Relarian rose slowly, stretching across crystal terraces and stirring the cities awake with warmth older than memory. Peace was no longer myth, it was motion, deliberate and earned, a world once ruled by tradition, now pulsed with renewal. At the Royal Observatory, Queen Adira Talanai stood in silence, her gaze sweeping past the clouds. Her robes bore the metallic sheen of Relarian silk, but beneath them lay a necklace Frank had given her, a firehouse badge, weathered and worn, nestled against her heart. The door creaked open. Frank entered quietly, wearing a tailored uniform that merged Earth's practicality with Relarian's elegance. A small emblem stitched at the collar, a phoenix wrapped in flame and starlight. He walked beside her, and for a moment neither spoke. "You still miss the smell of smoke?" she asked, grinning. "Only when things get too perfect," he replied. Adira turned to him, voice soft. "I met you in fire. I crowned myself in trial, but I live in the spaces between, the stillness, the choice." Frank nodded. "You chose to burn and rise from the flames. A phoenix. That's rarer than royalty." Below them, children played in courtyards where sentinels had once marched. Peacekeepers wore crests inspired by Frank's engine company. Schools taught both interstellar navigation and Earth languages. And at the edge of the gardens, a statue had been raised, not of Adira's coronation, but of her rescue, cast in bronze and flame glass, depicting a firefighter pulling a princess from the rubble. "We should visit Earth again," Adira said suddenly. "I hear there's a new chili recipe in San Mora." Frank smiled. "If it tastes half as weird as the last one, I'm all in." Together they stepped away from the window, not toward ceremony, not toward legacy, but toward a future built in the quiet between stars and the fires of human choice. And somewhere, on a planet that had once burned for a girl in a blue gown, sirens rang again. But this time the world knew what it meant to save and be saved. The end